Hi guys, welcome to Digital TechJoint. In this section, we are going to learn about the correct project architect required for ASP.NET MVC. I come across a lot of projects where we create a default MVC project using the default template, and over the period, because of the complexity, your project gets extended and we end up having a structure which is very complicated to manage and implement change in the project. So I got a lot of comments and a lot of emails saying that to create a video that shows how do you create a project structure which is more distributed and which enables a easy and flexible way of making changes and managing the project. So in the next slide, we are going to understand what is monolithic architect. So before we deep dive into the actual way of creating a project structure, I like to know what is a monolithic architect. So typically most of the developers try to create a project and they create a project using a monolithic architect without being aware what is a monolithic architect. So if the project has its presentation layer, business layer, data layer and all the other layers like service layer or utility layer in a one single code base, then that application known as a monolithic architect. That means when you compile the entire project, you have a single DLL that compromises of your presentation layer, your business layer, your service layer and a database layer. So monolithic architect leads to a lot of problems over the period. When your project gets complicated, when the number of views and models increases, it becomes very difficult to compile the entire application. It becomes very difficult to introduce a minor change also in the project. So here are the disadvantages of monolithic architect. Over the time, the project becomes too large and hence difficult to manage. Even if there is a minor change in any of the layers, still the whole application need to be deployed. Since the project size becomes larger, it takes time to compile the code and bug fixes. Tightly coupled and hence difficult to scale and attain flexibility. Difficult to perform unit testing. Maintenance overheads. Wrong code fix or change implemented wrongly will bring the entire application down. Now what is the right approach? Now since in this channel we introduce and create a lot of videos on ASP.NET MVC, I thought it could be a better approach to implement a distributed architect using ASP.NET MVC application. Now the default project template provided by Microsoft for ASP.NET MVC application is undoubtedly good. The way it provides the capability to add scaffold and create entire CRUD application with no times looks like some magic. However, adding model controller view migration provided by the entity framework all seems good, but as your project size and complexity increases, it becomes tough to manage the project scalability, usability and flexibility. Having said that, there is a situation and project needs where the requirement is bare minimum and less complexity that you can very well opt for default setting. So setting up the correct architect depends on the project requirement and complexity. So this is a very important point, because when you have a requirement which requires less number of views and less number of model, then you don't have to necessarily adopt a distributed architect because it will add more code to your project. So totally depends on the requirement. If you feel that you're going ahead, your project will be complex, it will grow in size and complexity, then it is very well advised that you take the distributed approach, where I'm going to show you practically how you can do that. So guys, in the next session we are going to learn about how to set up in a practical session very shortly. So let's dive into the practical session right now. So I have opened Visual Studio 2022 and I'm going to create a new project in ASP.NET MVC application. So we click on new project, we select ASP.NET Core Web App Model View Controller. I'm going to name this project as HRMS, the location where the project is going to be saved, and click on next. I'm going to select .NET 6.0 and untick configure for HTTPS as of now, and I click on create. So we have the default template loaded in ASP.NET MVC application, and here you can see we have a folder called models and views, and we are going to create more folders for data management. So right now the aim is that I'll create a project which will have a CRUD application where we'll be able to add, update, delete and read the data using the migrations, and then we are going to segregate that and convert that into more distributed architecture. This way the understanding of having a distributed architecture will be very clear to everybody. So let's go and quickly add the code to create a CRUD application. First we are going to go ahead and create a database. I'm using 2012 Express edition of SQL Server, and I'm going to create a database called HRMS, so that we are going to save employee database. So we connect the database instance, we right click the database, create new database. Now I'm going to say HRMS. So our database is ready, and here you can see our HRMS database is created. Now we'll get back to our application, and we are going to click on app setting JSON and add the connection string. I already copied my connection string. I'm going to paste it, which is the default connection string. My server instance, my database is HRMS. Integrate security is true since I'm not using username password, and trust server certificate is true. So this is my connection string. I'll go ahead and create a model. So I right click on the model folder, add a new class, name it as employee entity. Now this employee entity will store certain properties where we are going to add the so this will be the ID, which should be our key parameters, which will be unique, and then we are going to add name, prop tab and string. It will be designation. Just copy this. This will be department and email. So let us add these parameters. Now we'll go ahead and create a folder called data, which will be used to manage the database instance and connectivity. So the data. So right click, I'm going to add a class called Application DB Context. Fine. So we have added a model and we have added a data layer. So now let's go ahead and set up the connection string from an application. For that we'll read certain packages. So right click on your project and say manage NuGet packages. And you'll have to install the following packages, which I'm going to install right now. So first I'm going to search for Entity Framework Core. So here we have the Microsoft Entity Framework Core. We install that. I'm installing 7.0.0 version, and then we are going to install, since we are going to work with SQL, we are going to install SQL Server instance. So we are going to install Microsoft Entity Framework Core SQL Server. Since we are going to use migration to create database tables, we are going to use tools of Entity Framework. So let's install that too. Microsoft Entity So here we have Microsoft Entity Framework Core.tool, and finally we are going to install Microsoft Entity Framework Design, since we are going to use scaffolding. And so here it is, Microsoft Entity Framework Core Design, and install this also. So we have installed the following packages. We have installed Core, Design, SQL Server and tools. So our packages is ready and installed. Let's go back to our data application DB contest, and this class will implement the DB contest class. So we are able to see that it is not able to find the DB contest class. Just click on that and press Ctrl and dot, and you will be able to select the reference. So we need to add the Microsoft Entity Framework core reference. Now click on the application DB contest, and on the left hand side select the option constructor with options. So this line is added. This will be used to establish the database connection with our HRMS database by using a dependency injection, and we are going to inject that dependency injection in the program.cs file. Now after that, we create a DB set property, and we pass our employee entity class and give the name of the property, which will be the name of the table in our database. So let's say employee details. So this is the name of the database table that will be created in our database, HRMS database. So we have our connection string ready. Now we have an application DB contest ready, we have the model ready, and the connection string ready. So let's go ahead to program.cs and add a dependency injection to create the database connection string. So we are going to say builders.services.add DB contest, and we are going to pass our application DB contest. Open the bracket, say options, lambda expression, and say options dot use ms SQL, and inside this we are going to call builder dot configuration dot get connection string and pass our default connection. So default connection is the name that I've provided to if you look at the app settings. So this is a default connection that I've specified in the connection string. So our setup for database connectivity is ready. Now let's use our migration tool of Entity Framework and set up the tables in a database. Click on tools, and you get package manager, select package manager console. I'm going to use the command add migration, and this is our initial database setup, and click on enter. So the build is started, and it will create a folder called migrations, and it will create all the scripts necessary to create the table in a database. Here you can see the folder is created called migration, and within that migration class you are able to see all the necessary scripts required to create the table called employee details with the properties in the database. So let's go ahead and fire this command so that we can have the database created in a table. Right now the tables are not yet created, so in order to create a database, let's fire this command update database. So the build is succeeded, and very soon you'll be able to see that the command is getting executed and is successfully done. And right now if you go to a database and just refresh it, you'll be able to see the tables created in a table, and the migration table as well as employee details with the properties and column defined in a model class. So our project is ready, and now let's go quickly create a scaffold of this project, of this model, and create a module that will be able to add, update, delete, and read the data. For that, let's go ahead and right click on your controller, say add new scaffold item, and select MVC controller with view using Entity Framework. So this will be a model class, will be your employee entity, and your database contest will be application DB contest. And this is a controller name. By default it is saying employee entity. I just want to keep it as employee. Don't remove the controller keyword, just change it to employee and let the controller keyword will be there. Click on add, and very soon your entire model will be scaffolded, and we'll be able to see a model that is up and running. So guys, our scaffold was successful. I'll just rebuild it once. It is advisable that after your scaffold is completed, you should rebuild your project. So rebuild is successful, and you can see that under the controller, now we have a controller called employee created by Microsoft Scaffold library, and you can able to see that it is performing all the CRUD operation. We will go ahead and add a link in our shared layout in the menu, and here we have a menu already called which is used for privacy. We'll remove that and say employee list, and this will be our controller employee. Our action, default action will be index. If you go to the views folder, you can see there's an employee folder, and you can see the index, edit, delete, create, everything is created. Now let's run this project once and just check whether all the records are getting added and displayed, so that we can go ahead and perform the main activity, that is having a distributed setup for a project. So our project is loaded. This is a default page, and here I've added the employee list. Let's click on that, and you'll be able to see that there is no record as of now. We're going to create a new record. So this is it. We'll create, and we create an add. Fine, so we click on the create button, and I'm sure the record is created. You are able to view the details, we are able to edit it, and so we are able to save it and everything. So our module is ready. Now the purpose of this section is not to create a CRUD application show it to you, but the idea is that now we have a project, and in a real scenario we go ahead, we create this project, and we keep adding the controller, we keep writing more code to our database layer, and then we keep adding models and views, and over the period this entire project will get loaded with hundreds and 500s of views and controllers. Now the point here is that the moment you decide that you want a distributed architect, the faster you need to take a call on whether you want a project to be a distributed layer or you want a single code base. Right now everything is working and it is a single code base. Now we are going to create a distributed architect, and while we are doing this, we need to make certain changes in our current project, otherwise the project won't work. So let's go ahead and create a distributed architect in this project. So I right click on the project solution. The solution name is HRMS. So I'm going to right click on that and say add new project, and I'm going to select class library project and click on next. The first class I'm going to do is HRMS data access. So this will be my data layer. This will be .NET framework 6.0. so this is the first project I created. Then second, I'm going to again right click on the solution and say new project, and here I'm going to select class library, and this will be having all my model class. So HRMS entities, so this will have my entity. Now in this project I don't have a service layer or a common utility, but for a demo I will create one more project and name it as common utility, HRMS common utility. So you can use this project to have common utilities like sending mails and validating or something like that. And then obviously we in a distributed architecture we'll have some layers which will call some external services and consume in a project. Assuming we have that, we create one more project called HRMS service layer. Click on next. So now you can see we have a project which has multiple code base, which has multiple layers. So we have a layer called HRMS web, which is our UI. Then we have data access layer, entity layer, that's a model class, assuming we have a service layer where we'll be consuming all the services, and then we have a common utility layer. So this is a well structured project architect. Now in order to make a project work, we will practically show how this can be done. So first let's move our model class. So we just drag this model folder into our entity. So we did that. Then we have a data access layer. So we move our data folder into data access layer. We also move our migration into the data access layer. So these are the two important things which we have done. Right now we don't have a common utility, so we just delete this class, and also we delete the class for service layer. We did that. Now since we have moved our data layer and model into our respective project structure, let's go ahead and delete these things from here. So I delete the data folder and I delete the model folder. I'm sure our things won't work right now, but let's go step by step. Now in the data access layer, we have kept the class inside the data because that is how we created in our HRMS VI project. But right now, since it is designated for data access, let's move this to the project level. So I moved this class application DB context to the project layer, and I delete this folder called data. The migration folder, let it be under the migration folder, because as and when we add more entities, we write more tables to the database, as and when it will create more classes. So it is better that it is organized under migration folder. We don't require class 1, the default class. So now inside this application DB context, you see we are getting this error because we don't have the packages installed. So let's go right click on HRMS data access and select manage NuGet package, and let's install the entity core. So we install Microsoft Entity Framework Core, and also we install SQL Server. These two packages is required. So we have installed that, and we should be able to see that the error is gone. Now we don't have this showing an error in HRMS models because now the reference is changed. It has become to HRMS entity. So right click on your HRMS data access, click on add, and select project reference and select entity. Click on OK, and we are going to say HRMS entity and models. So we don't require model now, we just require HRMS entity. And now if I click on employee entity, click on control and dot, you'll be able to see using HRMS models. The reference is added. We don't want this, because here if you see in the entities, I delete this class 1 and click on entities. So the namespace is still HRMS model, and we should change the namespace to HRMS entities. Click on entities and select this to HRMS entities, and we don't require model, we just require HRMS entity. And same for your this also is HRMS entities. Now we just build this HRMS entity once. So this is succeeded. We go back to our data access layer, and here we are going to say HRMS entities, and you can see the error should be gone from here. Use HRMS entities. So we have done a correct reference to our model class. Now we will see there is no error in a application DB context. We'll still right click on the HRMS data access and rebuild once. Okay, so now our data access is ready, our entity model is ready. Let's go back to our HRMS and try to run the project, and you'll see loads of error because it has lost reference to a model as well as data access. So we right click and rebuild it. You see this number of errors. So let's take a step-by-step approach and fix these issues. First is we need to go to views folder And inside the view folder, we'll have something called underscore view imports. Now, underscore view imports as reference to our external libraries and projects. The first thing we need to do is right click on our HRMS main folder project, click on add, select project reference, and select the following reference of the project, that is HRMS common entity, HRMS service layer, HRMS entity, and HRMS data access. Now once you do that, we need to come over here and select HRMS data access, HRMS entities. We don't have anything in the service level, but still I will refer that for your understanding. HRMS. If you go to our HRMS service, it doesn't have any class, that is why it is not referring, but you can refer the entity. So you can add a class over here and service layer. So this is a service layer which will be called, and I'll just make this as public. So here you can import or refer your call your services which can be referred in your view start or view import. So you can refer that over here. So you add these references like that in your view import razor page in your main project. Now once you add the references in your project, then it's easy to go ahead and make the changes. The first thing we are going to do is that we are going to make the changes in the controller. So we go to our employee controller, and here you can see HRMS data model, which is no more there. So you want to just change that to HRMS data access, and then this becomes HRMS entity. So you refer this, and once you refer this, all this error is gone now, because we referred the right class, and now it is referring to this project instead of referring inside the project. Now let's go rebuild this HRMS main project and see how many errors we are getting now. So they still fail, because if you go to programs, in your programs there is still reference of HRMS data, which has become HRMS data access layer. So you see the project is, and now error is gone. We again do a rebuild. So now it's showing 0 errors, but there is still some issue now, 15 error. We go back to our, okay, so this is the migration folder, I guess, HRMS migration. Okay, so migration is not part of this. I forgot to delete it, so I delete it from the main folder. Now migration is saved in this folder, so I removed that. Now let's rebuild it. Okay, 13. Now we have 13 error. Let's see. Okay, so it's view model. Click on views and click on controller home. So here we have, in the home we have reference to change that to entities. We rebuild it. Okay, so models does not exist in HRMS. So where it's referring model somewhere here. Show potential, use HRMS entities. Okay, so remove this because it was for HRMS entities. Now let's see, there's more error. Close the project, all the projects, and try to rebuild once. Okay, so let's closely watch what exactly is the issue. The type mixing model does not exist in HRMS. Guys, this error is because in our view we have made the changes to the rest of the classes, but when you go to our employees view, if you click on index, you see that this is referring to HRMS models.entity. So we'll remove this HRMS.models because it is referring to HRMS entities.employee entity. So we remove that, and we do the same for edit, and we do the same for delete details, and then delete, and then create. So let's rebuild now. Fantastic, succeeded. So let's do one thing. Let's close all these project files, and let's right click on the main solution and say rebuild. So all our project should be rebuilt successfully, and we run the application and it should work as it is, and we should be able to see the record which we added and also do a CRUD operation. Let's run this project now. Let's go ahead and click on the employee list and see what happens. Fantastic, you are able to load the record, and let's also create a new entities, new record. And we are able to also create a new record. So fantastic. Now if you look at a project once again, you see that our project is now not a single code based project, as I explained in the start, and it has various entities. Now the responsibility is divided between the different project layers. Now if you look at HRMS, this is responsible for the UI, that is the front ending of an customers, which has only the view and the controller. Then we have a data access layer which is only designated for performing database connectivity. Then we have entity models which will have all your entity models and it will be in sync with the database. You have a service layer where we will be invoking services which will be called by your HRMS frontend. And then you have the common utility that will be used to perform some common activity in your project. Now having this architecture in place, you have shared the responsibility between various projects within your main solution, and it creates a very even if it is a project is complicated, it has a separate layers. Also the most important thing is that you'll be able to also deploy your projects in a different servers, and you can have your data access layer deployed on your database application server. You can have your front end deployed on your IIS web servers, so you can distribute the load also. So this is how I created a single code based database into a distributed architect. And you see, while I was converting that, I had to face some challenges. I had to add some reference, remove some reference from an existing main project. So that is the reason I insist that you should take a call before creating a project, whether you want a distributed fashion of architect of a project, or you want to go with a single code base, depending upon the requirement which you have in your hand. So guys, I hope you like this video, and please do like all my videos. Please do subscribe and share my video channel with your friends and colleagues, and help us to grow this network. Thank you so much.